Matthew 14, starting at verse 22. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitude away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now when the evening came, he was alone there. But the boat was now in the middle of the waves, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the water. When the disciples saw Jesus walking on the water, they were troubled, saying, "It is a ghost," and they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid." And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, as if you command me to come out to you on the water." So he said, "Come." And when Peter had come out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, "O you little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." This is one of those stories that has been with us forever and ever. It is a childhood favorite for many of us, and rightly so. I think it should be a childhood favorite. One of the things I would like to point out to you in the beginning is in the very first verse here, when Jesus sent them out, he knew where he was sending them. He knew what he was sending them into. Jesus was not surprised by the storm. Jesus was not surprised about having to walk on the water. Jesus knew what was happening. Now the question is, did the disciples know? And I'm going to tell you that though the text does not directly state that, the disciples did not know. They did not expect to see Jesus come walking on the water, right? They thought they were seeing a ghost. Had they expected Jesus walking on the water, of course they would not have thought he was a ghost. So what we have here in this little beginning is that Jesus is our teacher. We call him the great teacher. We call him the great physician. In this lesson we're going to call him the great trainer, because that's what Jesus is here to do. He is here to train us, to level us up, to bring our talents out so that we can be more and more. And ultimately, I think he is training us to be like him. I think if you want to summarize Christianity, the very core of Christianity is love. We talked about that last week. Won't repeat that one right now. And then it is also Jesus is trying to create, I know this sounds a little odd, but let me say it this way in quotation marks. Jesus is trying to create a bunch of little Jesuses out of us. We are to be imitating him. That is the goal. Now I get the wording's a little awkward there, but we'll go with it for right now. So what he's doing in the storm here for them, and what he does for us in the storms, is he trains us to keep our faith and our focus through the storms of life. Because anybody can be a good disciple when everything is going right and there are no problems, no challenges, no ups or downs. Everything's just running along smooth and everything's comfortable. That's the easy part. That's kind of like being in the military and being on weekend break. Any soldier can be in the military on weekend break, right? It's when the going gets tough that you find out who was really a soldier and who's not. So we have kind of the same idea here. So he is our great trainer, and this is the underlining purpose of Christianity, to take us off as babies on milk and to move us all the way up to as far as we have potential to go. So we're going to be using our talents. You can think of Matthew 25:14 there if you want to make a note on that. He is training us to do things like teach classes, to talk to people about God's Word, whether we're talking about the classes in the back or classes in here or in your home around your coffee table, at the coffee shop. He's training us how to lead prayers, to get out and be part, here, this church family, when we assemble, we have prayer times. And this is one of the things that we have people do. We make announcements. We lead songs. We have devotions. Well, we ought to have some more of those. We need to work those in if we can get folks to step up to it. We have invitations at the end that are a minute or two long. We have full-blown sermons. We have all these opportunities. And Jesus is the trainer who says, I saved you not to set you on a pew. I saved you to use you. I saved you so you could be a soldier in my army working in my vineyard. This is the idea, but in order to be a soldier working in a vineyard, that's a mixing up of analogies, isn't it? Well, let's mix up a third one. To be a soldier working in the vineyard, you got to get out of the boat. And if you stay in the boat, well, it just doesn't work as well that way. So he's in the training business. He came here knowing he was going to put us through some stuff. And let's face it, life is going to put you through some stuff, whether you want to be Christian or not, right? Life does everybody pretty much the same if you'll look at it. Now, I know individual cases vary, but if you'll look at the whole of mankind, everybody suffers just about like everybody else. There's millions and millions of people who have been what you're going through. Life is going to do something to you. Now, the question is, will it be training? Because let's face it, these guys weren't the first guys in a boat on the sea in a storm, were they? But this case was training. This case was special because these are the disciples of Christ. So he's training us. Matthew 5:16, that's where he says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. So we are supposed to be lights that shine, activities that people look at and go, look at brother so-and-so. Thank you, Father. Look at sister so-and-so over here. Thank you, Father. We are supposed to be people who do not, I love this word, latibulate. That means hide in the corner. We're not supposed to be people that hide on the sidelines, hide in the corner, sit in the bleachers, and just watch other folks. We are supposed to be folks out on the playing field where other people see what we do, and they see that we're doing it for the glory of God, and they praise God for the work that we do. Titus 2:14, he tells us we're supposed to be a peculiar, special people, zealous for good works. That's the training business he's in. We are people who are supposed to say, Lord, here am I, send me. We even have a song about that one, don't we? We sing, Lord, here am I, send me. That's it. Now, where do you want to send me, Lord? What do you have in mind for me? And I'm afraid sometimes we go, well, you mean I got to go all the way halfway around the globe to China and teach the gospel in communist China? No. That's not the kind of going we're talking about. I say this a bit in jest, but I'm very serious at the same time. When Jesus sat in Jerusalem and said to the disciples in what we call the Great Commission, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, he was in Jerusalem, right? We're a long ways from Jerusalem. We're half a globe away from Jerusalem. We are in all the world. I don't have to be going to China to fulfill the Great Commission. I'm in a foreign country as it is compared to where Jesus was when he issued that command. So when we say, Lord, here am I, send me, I don't want you thinking about, traveling the globe. If that's in your heart, go ahead. But I really want you to think about Jefferson County, this community right here. Lord, here am I, send me to somebody to share the gospel, to be a light, to be an influence. 2 Timothy 4:2, that's where he tells us to preach the word, be instant in season and out of season. So anybody can be in a boat on the sea when the season is good, when the weather is fair and the waters are smooth. Have you been in a boat when the waters are not fair? And it's doing a whole bunch of this? Takes another person to hang there, doesn't it? It sure does. And so we do it whether it's comfortable or uncomfortable. Now, great point here. The storm was not punishment. Jesus sent them away right after feeding the 5,000 out into the ocean there. Sea, he knew what was coming. He was not angry with them. He was not being mean to them. He was not trying to punish them. This was the training. This was another level of training. And he knew they would be afraid. He knew that he was getting ready to scare the fool out of them. Do you know, when he came walking across the water, he understood what was going to happen. He didn't think they were going to go, oh, there's Jesus, woo, everything's going to be okay. He knew he was getting ready to scare the fool out of them. They were going to be exhausted. They were going to be stressed to their limit. And he still sent them right out into the middle of it, because that is where you get your best training. And we see this in so many other places of life. I don't want to start giving you too much of a list, but just think boot camp. And those of you guys who've been in boot camp, I know you can verify this. I have not, so I'm going to trust your judgment. But in boot camp, they bring you in, and as the bus pulls up to start your training, they come on there, and they've got a tray of Coke and candy and treats, right? And they're saying, welcome to base, guys. We want you to have a little treat before you go to the barracks. We got your favorite bed. They're all those number beds. You get to pick your number. We want you to have a good night's sleep, right? Now, I don't know if this is actually true, but on the educational channel, they showed a bus pulling up once, and the drill instructor gets on the bus, and the first thing he starts doing is yelling, and it's not polite stuff, but on public TV, they did keep it clean, and basically he's saying, what are you doing on my bus, you stupid pukes? Get off my bus. And it's cold, and it's mean, and it's harsh. What is the drill instructor trying to do as he scares the fool out of those 18-year-old boys? He's training them. What's he training them for? Because he knows it's possible one day he's going to send them into battle where people are trying to kill them for real. And if they can't keep their head with a drill instructor yelling at them who's on their side, how are they ever going to keep their head in the middle of battle? He's training. Training's not always fun, but it's there. He knew they'd be afraid. But if you want to be free from your fears, the first thing you have to do is overcome your fears. You have to look at it and go, that scares me to death. I don't know if I could ever do that. And the only way to get past that fear is to step into the big middle of it. And you will be scared in the big middle of it. There's no way around that. That's part of the training. But with the experience, you finally ease on out of it, and the fear is gone. Now, you may still have a little anxiousness and worries about it, but the fear is gone. So another real quick example. How many remember the first time they set you in the driver's seat, gave you the key? Said, okay, put your seatbelt on. Adjust the mirror. And if you're like me doing the training, you're over there. I think I was more scared than than Allie. If I train Madeline, I'm going to be scared too. I just got my name backwards there. So you're there, and I want to drive. Put it in reverse. No, put your foot on the brake first. Put it and take your foot. No, not that. You remember being scared to death? How many of you are scared when you get in the car now? Now, you're still aware, right? I hope you're aware, because there's some idiots out there texting and driving. You better be aware. But to be free from your fear, whether we're talking driving or skydiving or serving in the public assembly, the only way to be free from that fear is to step right into the big middle of it, and I might fall on my face. I might sink like Peter. But this is the only way through it. And this is what we do. So the 12 were not just spectators here in this sense. So we had the lecture, we had the classroom part. That was the feeding of the 5,000, which immediately precedes this event. And so you have the feeding of the 5,000, so we have the lecture, the classroom event, but they didn't get it. Now that's pretty amazing in and of itself. But that's exactly what the text told us that we read a while ago, is that they didn't understand about the fish and the loaves. And so they have the lesson, they see it, they take up 12 full baskets when it's all over, and it's not sinking in through their head for some reason or another. It's not being understood. And Jesus says, okay, we got another lesson. We're going to have to do one more here. Y'all get in the boat, you out to the sea. I'm going to go up on the mountain and pray for a while. I'll catch up with you. Now that right there should have told him he was either going to get a boat or walk on the water, right? They got the boat, they're out. I will catch up with you. What? You can't... We need to, no, he's got this. So we had the lecture, and now what do we need? Come on, clicker. We need a whole new level of training. And that was the storm. The storm and that event hit them in a way, in a direction that a more comfortable event never could have done. So now look at it again. When he went up on, when he went up into the boat and the wind ceased, I want you to notice that because we're going to come back to that. The wind didn't stop till Jesus got in the boat. And they were greatly amazed in themselves beyond measure and marvel. Now, verse 52, for they had not understood about the loaves because their heart was hardened. They just didn't get it. But now they were. Now in the middle of the storm, they were going, whoa. You can look at Mark's account on this also. So likewise, we must not be spectators. Our best training is in the storm. That is absolutely where we're going to learn the most. Classrooms, I do not want to take classrooms away. Classrooms are great. Right now, I'll pick on Maddie just a little bit, not bad, but she's studying to get her driver's permit. And she's doing pretty good in her studies right now, okay? But can she drive yet? Now, let's say she goes down next week and she passes the test and gets her permit. The moment they hand her the permit, can she drive now? Is she an experienced driver? Let me put it that way. She now has the legal right to get behind the wheel and scare her mom and daddy and grandpa to death or whoever else is in the car, right? She has the legal right to do that, but only until she spends some time in it, only until she goes through the storm of learning to go down the highway 55 miles an hour with nothing but a yellow line separating you from the oncoming semi-truck in the other lane. Kind of scary when you say it that way, isn't it? Only when she is through the storm will she start to become comfortable and learn. That's your best training. You just step right in the big middle of it. Now we have our symbolic storms, like, leading prayers, and prayer's a funny time. Used to be, and we're doing a little different now post-COVID, but it used to be we had the men that would say the prayers at the table. And we had two guys on the end that just helped walk the aisle and pass the elements. So we used to get to ease you in. And you would just stand on this end of the table and you didn't have to say anything. And then, after you got comfortable just standing there, and there's a learning curve, there's a growing time, that's good. Then we would kind of bump you over to the middle if we could. And this is still a real easy place to pray. Even post-COVID, this is an easy place to pray because how many options do you have on what to say in the Lord's Prayer? There's not a lot of option there, is there? If you want to do a little talk, you have a little bit more option. But as far as the prayer goes, there's not a lot of option. So you don't feel a big stress to, I got to come up with something because it's pretty much already there. And then we would move you up to praying, and for some reason, I don't get this part, but I know it's a deal. Closing prayer. How many of you feel like, oh yeah, I can do closing prayer. I got closing prayer. But if they come up to you and go, hey, we need someone for opening prayer, you go, I don't know if I can do opening prayer. Now think with me a second. What is the big deal between opening prayer and closing prayer? How many of you remember what Brother Mark said in the opening prayer? How many of you, right now, remembered that it was Brother Mark that said the opening prayer? Okay, Caleb, I heard Caleb Archer's holding up his hand. This is my point. We, when we're newbies, we're like, oh, I'm scared to death. I got to say this opening prayer and I'm going to mess it up. And by the time we sit down and Jeff's up leading the second song, by the time he's into the third song, half of the people don't even remember who led the opening prayer. And then, so we get scared to death about that one, but I'll do the closing prayer. Well, if you have that going on, I'm not going to argue with you on the psychology of it. I'm just going to say, okay, it's time to get out of the boat of the closing prayer and step up to the next level and get into the opening prayer. Learn to say an opening prayer. Instead of saying goodbye, you say hello. That's the main difference. Leading songs, song leading, now that takes a little bit of a skill there, basic talent. But, it's a Wednesday night, singing night. A little easier, isn't it? I was still nervous the first time, but a little easier. Sunday morning, that's another thing. So that's just up in the game. Announcements, talking in front of folks, it's all written down. It's not that tough, but it's still something that's your storm. Teaching a class. Now, this is the one that tickles me. Now, teaching an auditorium class like Chris does, an adult class, or a teenage class like Mark and Dave does, those, and even I'm going to take you all the way down to 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. Those kids can ask some questions. Now, the beautiful thing about 4th, 5th, and 6th grade is they ask some beautiful questions, and they're so sincere and wonderful about it. You get into adult class, you have some people that just be mean, they're ugly, and they want to be hateful. I mean, that happens even among us. That happens sometimes because they don't think about how they sound or how they appear or what they're doing in their exchange with a teacher. And so you better be ready for some stormy seas now and then, because there are going to be some people in the auditorium going to get ugly with you now and then just because, I don't know, I better leave that alone. And so teaching, but toddlers? Come on, toddlers. Oh, I can't teach them. I do not mean any insult to our teaching ladies who are teaching the lowest level. I'm talking 2, 3-year-olds back there. But if you're scared of 2 or 3, 4-year-olds, we got a problem. Because we're talking basic Bible stories. Basic. David, Goliath, took a rock, sling, hit him in the head, chopped off his head if you want to get gruesome. God's on his side, That's that kind of stuff. But we get those fears in us, and we get to clinging to the boat. We're white-knuckling the boat big time. We have our symbolic storms, folks. We got them. What scares you? If the elders were to come up to you and ask you to do X, Y, or Z, what would just scare the fool out of you? Oh, I don't know. That's your symbolic storm. And so my next question is, who do we admire the most? The 11 that sat in the boat, or the one that got out of the boat? Which one do you admire the most? The one that just sits on the pew and does nothing, or the one who has the courage to get up and make mistakes in front of an audience? And let me tell you, if you get in front of an audience, you are going to make mistakes. Nobody bats 1,000. You can't do it perfect. Peter was willing to get out of the boat. Now, let's take another turn here. They didn't recognize Jesus. Isn't that interesting? Now, that's Matthew 14, 25, and 26 if you want to glance back at it, but I don't see a need to read it at this time. How could it be that these guys had spent all this time with Jesus and could not recognize him when he was walking on the water? Well, I think we have two answers, and my first one is they were emotionally, they were physically, they were mentally stressed out. They had been fighting the wind, the waves. They'd been rowing against the oars, and they were just, we would say at their wits' end. And so one of the things we've got to learn to do is how to keep our focus during a hard time. Now, this is tricky. Let me tell you why this is tricky. The only way to learn to keep your focus during a hard time is to have a hard time. You cannot train running in the snow, for example, by running on a spring morning when it's 62 degrees and the breeze is blowing and the birds are chirping. That's not training to run in the snow. You know when you train to run in the snow? When it's 18 degrees outside and there's 6 inches of snow and you're out running in the snow. That's when you train to run in the snow. You know how to train to run in the the rain? It's got to be raining. I guess you could be creative and put a sprinkler on top of your treadmill, but I don't recommend that one. So the only way to train how to be tough in hard times is to get in the middle of a hard time and then go, okay, this is training right here. This is my chance to level up. This is my chance to be better because this day stinks. And I could sit home in my recliner, stay in bed, or I could crawl under the desk and hide, or I can say, this day stinks. This is my storm. I am going to be the best I can be in the middle of a hard time. That is the only way to learn how to do it, because some things you cannot learn in a classroom. You can't do it. We can talk about it. I can talk about the psychology of being strong and focused and deliberate and talk about it for weeks and weeks and weeks. But until you get out of the classroom and put it into practice, it will never ever take the depth, the hold, and make the changes in your life that it could without the practice. Let me just go back to the learning to drive example. Madeline can study her instructor's manual now until she's 32. Now, her mama might like that idea. She says, I'm good with that. Will she ever learn how to drive just studying the manual. She can memorize that manual, right? But until she gets behind the wheel, turns on the engine, puts the car in drive, there's no learning. You can study skydiving all you want. Watch every YouTube video there is to watch. You can watch every educational thing about skydiving you can find. You can spend your life doing it. But you won't know how to do it till you jump out of the plane. Now, I don't know why anybody would want to jump out of a perfectly good plane, but that's the way you learn how to skydive. There are just some things, brethren, we cannot learn sitting on the pew. We can get some fundamental basics, we can get some ideas, but we can never get the experience leading songs sitting on a pew. You can't get experience preaching sitting on a pew. You can't get experience teaching class sitting on a pew. You got to get out of the boat, and boat is spelled P-E-W. Am I connecting the dots clear enough? That's what we need. So, second answer, they didn't recognize Jesus. And that's they only had two options as I'm looking at it. Now maybe we come up with a third, but basically you've got Jesus walking on the water, you got something bad. And of the two options they had, they chose something bad. That's the first place their mind went. Jesus did not cross their mind. We don't read anything about there being a little debate. Oh, what's that on the water? I don't know, it might be Jesus. No, it can't be Jesus. It looks like it got to be a ghost. I'm not sure. There was no debate. They saw this figure on the water, didn't recognize who he was, and the first thing they do is cry out, it's a ghost. They're scared, they're afraid, they're frightened. Fear is one of the first things that will come up in the human mind and the human heart. Now, there's a lot of neat psychology behind that, but this isn't the place for it. But they had heard Jesus talking about being the Son of God, right? They thought they understood what that meant, but they didn't get that yet. They had seen the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000. They'd taken up the 12 baskets full of food after everybody had ate. They thought they understood some stuff. Jesus looked into their heart and said, you don't get a thing yet. Let me get you out here on the water, scare the fool out of you, and I think maybe you'll finally get the lesson. So they're out in the water, the boat's being tossed on the waves, Jesus comes walking along, they still don't understand the Son of God. They think, oh, it's a ghost. They start freaking out, and then he speaks to calm them. But they didn't get who he was. And in this whole training experience, which was fearful, he took them to a brand new level. They understood now who Jesus was. Go back and look at your text, and then they got it. Then they said, wow, you truly are the Son of God. So we're the same. We don't always see Jesus. It's so easy to sit here in our Bible class, in our sermons, and go, oh yeah, I get that. That makes perfect sense. That was a good lesson. That was a real good class, Brother Chris. We appreciate you doing that. I think I understand some things now. Then we'll turn around and we'll walk off and we'll get into the middle of our marriage. Y'all still talking about marriage? Get in the middle of our marriage, and that's where the storm is, and we forget everything we learned in the class. None of it crosses our mind, and all we see are ghosts and demons and problems and troubles all over the place. You got to get in the middle of that training, right in the big, middle, scary part of it, and then keep your focus. And that's the tricky part. Peter didn't do it quite well either. But that's why we call it training. You know, you're safer with Jesus. Jesus spoke, said, do not be afraid. But now, as I pointed out earlier, the storm doesn't end then. So he's still out from the boat some distance. We don't know how far. But he's still out from the boat some distance. They're crying, oh, it's a ghost. He says, don't be afraid. Storm's still going on. This is important. Storm's still going on. Storm doesn't stop yet. Storm ends when the training's done. Training's not done yet. Now, there is a sense in when the training is never done. You know how I say it. I'll repeat it just for the fun of it. Unless you are so perfectly complete that not even God in heaven can look in your heart and find one thing to improve. If you're that complete, you don't even need to be here. But if you're not that complete, then your training's not done. So there's that sense in which the training's not done. But then there's every class that has a training objective. And so this training objective is not done yet. So the storm doesn't end till the training's done. James chapter 1, 2 through 4, I don't think we understand the profundity. How about another big word? That's 2 for this lesson. The profoundness of that particular passage where he says, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. And then he goes on to explain to us that the testing, the trials, produce us, develop us, mature us so that we can be perfect, complete, lacking nothing. Where do we get that? We get that in the trials. In fact, our whole Matthew 14, 22 through 33 is just really an illustration of James chapter 1, verse 2 through 4. That's basically, you could reverse it that way. So comfort is not the goal of the training, not the goal at all. But in this moment, where is the absolute safest place to be? Okay, Jesus, let's just say he's 30 feet away. I'm just making that up. But let's say he's 30 feet away over here. He's standing on top of the water. Here's the boat over here, tossed to and fro by the waves. You getting seasick yet? Where is the safest place to be? In the boat over here being tossed to and fro by the waves, or Jesus over here standing on the water with the sea in submission under his feet? You want to be in the boat, tossed all over the place by the sea? Or with Jesus, with the sea in submission under his feet? Safest place to be is with Jesus right now. You couldn't be a safer place. I know the boat looks safe, but you couldn't be in a safer place than over with Jesus, who has the sea in submission. And Peter was the only one who got that. Now, I don't know what he was thinking. I don't have a clue what crossed his mind. Human wisdom goes, stay in the boat. Don't get out of that boat. But getting out of the boat was the only way to get closer to Jesus. But it was illogical. But you remember, I think it's Isaiah 55, 8 and 9, somewhere right in there. He basically says, my ways aren't your ways. My thoughts aren't your thoughts. Getting out of the boat to get closer to Jesus does not make logical sense. Peter getting out of the boat while the storm is still raging. The storm hadn't ceased yet. So when Peter's getting out of the boat, I'm trying to imagine that because the winds are tossing the boat. And he's trying to get with the rhythm of the waves so he can get a leg over and get out. James 4:8 says, draw near to God and he'll draw near to you. You just can't stay where you are and still get closer to God. That doesn't happen. It's a cooperative effort. God's drawing near. I like to think through Calvary. And I've got to draw near also. So sometimes we've got to get out of the boat. I like the boat. Boat's comfortable. Don't want out of the boat. But if I want to get closer to God, I got to do it. So what do you think the 11 thought? I don't have a clue, but I do know they weren't thinking me next. You know, when Peter said, Lord, that's you, command me to come to you, you didn't hear somebody else piping up and going, yeah, me too, me too. What were they thinking? I don't know. I think they were going, are you nuts? You can't walk on the water. But Jesus said, come. And now Peter had to make a choice. Did I really mean it? I said I wanted to grow. I said I wanted to be stronger. I said I'm pressing on the upward way, higher heights I'm gaining day by day. Still praying as I onward bound. You remember the song? I forget what it is in our book now, but Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. Now I've said it. So I've said, Lord, if that's you, let me come. Here am I, send me. Plant my feet on higher ground, Lord, please. And then he walks up to you, through one of the elders or the deacons or somebody else, and says, come. I got something I'd like you to do and try. I'd like you to move up to the next level. Now, are you one of the 11 staying in the boat? Or are you Peter trying to figure out how to get your leg over the boat and get out on that water? The cowardly go, can't Jesus just get in the boat with me? No. He came to train, not to coddle. Just like a drill instructor cannot train by coddling recruits, and Jesus can't train us by just patting us on the head and telling us what good children we are all the time. Now, a compliment's nice. I'm not saying they're wrong. But I'm saying if all a teacher does is walk around the classroom and tell every student what a wonderful, great student you are, here's your participation trophy. Oh, don't worry about that. It's okay. I know you got an F, but don't worry about it. You're a good kid. What kind of education is that kid ever going to get? Christianity is no different. Christianity is no different in that regard. So Peter got out of the boat, and it's while the storm is still going. It is not when the storm has stopped. It's not when the boat is at the shore. It's while the storm is still going. Storm doesn't stop till Jesus gets in the boat. Peter's getting out and he's going on the water with him. And God is looking for people like that. They say, I might be nervous, but I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Peter may have thought that in God's hands he was enough. I don't know exactly what he thought, but he did experience the impossible. Don't you know when this was all over, the other 11 had to ask him, because I would have done it, what was that like? What did it feel like under your sandals there when you stood on the water for those few steps you took? You'd have to ask that question, right? We're going to close. Now we're going to finish this in the third session because there is so much more here. I can't even get it all into 2 lessons. But right now we'll close here. We're straight up 10 o'clock. God is still looking for people that are willing to get out of the boat.